I still remember the sound of the crowd cheering that day. Thousands of families celebrating success, pride, and love. But not mine. My name's Sarah, and at my graduation, while everyone else was taking pictures with their parents, I stood alone under a grey sky. My cap felt heavier than it should have, not because of the weight, but because of the silence. Then, buzz. A single notification. Dad, don't expect help. 4 words. No, congratulations. No, I'm proud of you. Just that cold, sharp message that cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. I stared at the screen, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but it felt like my father had chosen it to remind me. I was on my own. He always believed success had to look a certain way. A high GPA, a stable job, a life that looked exactly like his. He was the kind of man who measured love in achievements, who saw emotion as weakness. Growing up, I was never enough. When I built my first computer at 15, he said, "That's cute, but try something useful." When I got into a startup incubator during college, he said, "That's not a career, that's a hobby." Every time I tried to show him what I loved, he made sure I knew it didn't count, not unless it matched his definition of success. So that day, when he texted me, I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I just saved the message, like a scar I didn't want to forget. You know that moment when life forces you to choose between proving someone wrong or proving yourself right. That was my moment. Before I continue, if you've ever had someone doubt you, someone who made you feel small when all you wanted was to be seen, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because what happened next, it changed everything. I moved to the city 3 days after graduation. I didn't have a job, or money, or connections. Just a cracked phone, a second-hand laptop, and a quiet burning anger. At night, I'd eat noodles on the floor of my tiny apartment while watching videos about coding, entrepreneurship, and tech. I devoured every bit of knowledge I could find. While others slept, I built. While others partied, I dreamed. The loneliness was suffocating, but that pain, it kept me alive. Some nights I'd open my phone, stare at that message again. Don't expect help. And I'd whisper to myself, I won't. 6 months later, I launched my first app. It failed. Then I launched another. That one failed too. Investors laughed. Friends drifted away. Even my mother, quiet and kind as she was, called to say, maybe your father was right. But deep down, I knew I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing freedom. Freedom from his voice in my head. Freedom from needing his approval. Years passed. I learned. I failed. I rebuilt. And somewhere along the way, my pain became my purpose. My third startup, a small AI analytics company, started gaining attention. We weren't big, but we were smart. We didn't have money, but we had hunger. I hired people like me, the ones who'd been underestimated, ignored, or told they'd never make it. The office was barely more than a warehouse, but every night it glowed with ambition. One evening, my CFO, a brilliant woman named Mia, said something that stuck with me. You know, Sarah, revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about showing them you never needed them in the first place. She was right. I stopped thinking about my father then. At least I tried to. But some wounds, they never really close. 3 years later, we got our first big break. A major company approached us for a partnership. I remember walking into that meeting, suit slightly wrinkled, laptop under my arm, heart pounding like a drum. Their executives sat across from me, stone-faced, skeptical. But when I started presenting, when I saw their expressions shift from disinterest to curiosity to awe, I felt something inside me shift too. For the first time, I saw myself not as the boy my father rejected, but as the man he could never control. The deal closed. Our company exploded overnight. Investors flooded in. What started as a dream in a one-room apartment had suddenly turned into a multi-million-dollar venture. And that's when the world started noticing. I got invited to speak at events. News outlets wrote about the young visionary who built success from nothing. But behind every headline, there was still that quiet echo in my head. Don't expect help. I didn't, and I didn't need to. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, I got a message from my mother. Your father isn't doing well. I didn't know how to feel. He hadn't spoken to me in years. Not when my startup hit the news. Not when I bought my first house. Not even when the local paper printed my picture under the headline, Self-Made CEO Under 30. But now, suddenly, there was silence again. That same cold, uncertain silence I'd grown up with. And for the first time, I wondered, was he finally realizing what he'd lost? That night, as I sat by my office window, looking out over the city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because, for the first time, I didn't need to. I didn't need him at all. A month later, Mia rushed into my office, excitement practically glowing off her face. Sarah, it's happening. The board just approved it. We're going public. The words hit me like thunder. IPO. My heart raced. My throat tightened. All those nights of failure, pain, doubt. They suddenly felt like fuel for this one moment. We were about to become one of the fastest growing tech firms in the country. And right there, standing in that glass office, sunlight hitting the logo we'd built from scratch, I realized my story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rebirth, but destiny. It has a funny way of looping back when you least expect it, because the very next message I got, the one that appeared just minutes before our official IPO announcement, came from the one person I never thought I'd hear from again, Dad. And the moment I opened it, my hands started to shake. The message came at 9:47 a.m., just before I walked on stage to ring the opening bell. Dad, proud of you, son. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply box, but I couldn't move. The words looked harmless, even kind, yet all I could feel was the weight of everything behind them. Every silence, every insult disguised as advice. Every moment he'd made me believe I wasn't enough. Now, after years of nothing, now that the cameras were rolling, the press was calling, and the company was worth millions. Now he wanted to talk. Mia noticed my expression. Something wrong? She asked, tilting her head. I showed her the message. She exhaled through her nose, slowly. You don't owe him anything. I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure. That's the thing about parents. They break you in ways no one else can. And somehow, even when you grow stronger, a part of you still aches for their approval. So I didn't reply. I just locked my phone and walked out to the stage. Flashbulbs burst as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1, I hit the button. The bell rang, and in that moment, years of pain turned into applause. My company, my dream, had gone public. Cameras caught every second. Mia smiled proudly. Investors cheered. But somewhere inside, beneath the victory, I felt an empty space, like the sound of a missing note in a perfect song. After the ceremony, I went back to my office, opened my inbox, and there it was again. Another email from my father. Subject: Congratulations. Body: I knew you'd make something of yourself someday. I'm sorry if I was hard on you. Maybe we could meet? I'd love to talk about what's next. Proud of you, truly. I leaned back in my chair, reading it over and over. The tone was polished, professional, like a businessman trying to reconnect with a potential partner, not a father trying to reach his daughter. I could have ignored it, I could have deleted it, but instead, I whispered to myself, no, this time I'll listen. Because sometimes, silence isn't power. Sometimes, the real revenge is letting them see who you've become, up close. A week later, we met at a high-end restaurant downtown. I arrived early, my nerves steady but sharp. He walked in wearing the same confident stride I remembered, the kind that once made me shrink in my seat. His suit was expensive, but his eyes were tired. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying that old authority. "You look good, successful." I smiled politely. "Thanks. I watched the IPO on the news," he continued. "Incredible. You've built something remarkable." He paused, looking at me. Searching for weakness, maybe guilt. I was that tough on you, but it worked, didn't it? It made you strong. That line, that one sentence cracked something in me. He wasn't apologizing. He was taking credit. "You think you made me strong?" I asked quietly. "Of course," he said with a small, proud smile. "I pushed you because I knew you could handle it. You should thank me." I almost laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. "You told me not to expect help," I said. "You didn't push me. You abandoned me." He shrugged, unbothered. "Tough love. And look where it got you." For a moment, I just stared at him, realizing something profound. He'd never understand. Not the pain, not the nights alone, not the hunger that came from his rejection. But maybe I didn't need him to. Maybe what he deserved wasn't understanding. It was clarity. "You're right," I said finally. "I should thank you." His expression softened. Relieved, almost smug. And that's when I decided to let the real revenge begin. Over the next few weeks, I stayed in touch with him. I listened to his stories about regretting things, about wanting to reconnect, but the truth came out soon enough. He wasn't just reconnecting, he was struggling. His business, the one he'd once bragged about as his empire, was falling apart. Bad investments, old debts, the same arrogance that made him push me away was now pulling him under. And then came his real reason for reaching out. "I could use some advice," he said one night over dinner. "Maybe a little help if you can spare it." There it was. The same man who told me not to expect help, now asking for it. I looked him straight in the eye. "I'll think about it," he smiled, thinking he'd won me over. But inside, I was already planning. Mia wasn't surprised when I told her. "He wants you to save him," she said flatly. "After everything he did, he's not just asking for money," I replied. "He's asking for my power, my forgiveness. And he's going to get one of those, just not the way he expects." Mia studied me for a moment, then smiled knowingly. "You really are your own kind of justice, Sarah." I made a few calls, quiet ones, discreet ones. It turned out my father's company was in serious trouble, close to bankruptcy, drowning in debt. But the timing was perfect because through one of our investment branches, indirectly, through a few layers of ownership, we had the power to buy it, his company. The one he built, the one he loved more than he ever loved me. So that's what I did. For the next month, while he thought I was considering helping him, I was actually negotiating behind the scenes. Paperwork, shares, silent partnerships. Until finally, one late afternoon, Mia walked into my office holding a single folder. "It's done," she said softly. "You're now the majority owner." I opened the folder, scanned the documents, and saw it. My name, right there, above his. I felt a calm, heavy satisfaction. Not joy, not anger, just the quiet power of a man who'd taken control of his own story. "Schedule a meeting," I said. "With him, tomorrow." The next morning he arrived, still wearing that same confident expression. Not knowing the ground beneath him had already shifted, he extended his hand. "Ethan, glad you could make it. So, have you thought about what we discussed?" I nodded slowly. "I have." "And?" he asked. a hopeful edge in his voice. I turned to Mia, who handed him a folder, the same kind she'd handed me the day before. He opened it. His face stiffened as he read. What is this? It's your new partnership agreement, I said calmly. You're looking at the new majority owner. He blinked, confused. Then realization hit, and his mouth fell open. You bought my company. Technically, yes, I said, leaning back in my chair. Consider it an investment. In family, the silence that followed was deafening. He looked down, hands trembling, the color draining from his face. For the first time in my life, he looked small. You planned this, he whispered. No, I said. You did. When you told me not to expect help, he sat there speechless. The same man who once made me feel worthless, now staring at the contract that proved exactly how wrong he'd been. After he left, I sat in that empty boardroom for a long time. The revenge felt clean, but also heavy. Mia joined me quietly. You okay? She asked. I smiled faintly. Yeah, just thinking. About what? How sometimes the only way to heal is to let the wound see the light. As the sun dipped below the city skyline, I looked out the window. The same view I used to dream about from my one-room apartment. And for the first time, I felt something deeper than revenge. I felt peace, not because he'd lost, but because I'd finally won without him. The next few weeks after that boardroom meeting felt quiet. My father didn't call. He didn't email, not even a message through my mother. And honestly, I didn't expect him to. Some battles don't end with shouting. Some end with silence. The kind that says everything words never could. Still, I couldn't help thinking about him. The man who had built his life on control was now powerless in the one arena he'd always owned, business. And the irony? The company's survival now depended on me, the son he once dismissed. One afternoon I visited his old office, my office now. His nameplate was gone, replaced by mine. The walls were bare, but faint outlines of old frames lingered like ghosts of his past pride. I sat in his chair, the same one I'd never been allowed to touch as a kid, and whispered, "You see this, Dad? I didn't destroy what you built. I just built something better." The next day, he showed up unannounced. He looked older, smaller somehow, like the weight of everything he'd done had finally settled on his shoulders. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I came to say, I'm sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology." His voice shook between pride and regret, but for the first time I saw sincerity, maybe even fear. "You don't owe me anything," I replied gently. "This isn't about revenge anymore." He looked confused. "Then what is it about?" I smiled faintly. "It's about peace, and you can't buy that. Not with money, not with control." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I was wrong," he admitted, "about everything." That moment, that single, trembling confession, was worth more than any deal, any applause, any IPO. I didn't forgive him completely, but I let go, because holding on to hate only keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. Letting go means they can't hurt you anymore. Months passed. Under my direction, his company stabilized. Jobs were saved. New ideas took root. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me in meetings. Not as a rival, not as a disappointed father, but as a man finally seeing who his son had become. And one evening, as the office emptied and the sunset painted the glass walls gold, he walked over and said quietly, "You've done well, Ethan, better than I ever could." I turned to him, nodded once, and said, "I know, not with arrogance, with peace, because that's the real revenge, isn't it? Not proving them wrong, but becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and doing it without becoming like them." If you've ever had someone doubt you, tear you down, or tell you you'd never make it, remember this: your success doesn't need their approval. Your worth isn't measured by their recognition. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is no revenge at all, just living so fully that their memory fades behind you. If this story hits you right in the heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever seen? Because in the end, sometimes the best way to win is to walk away smiling